Mohammad Mahfoud, you are chairman of the Danish-Syrian Association, but you are also a person who is very well connected through family and many other things to many different places in Syria and follow very closely what is going on a day-to-day basis. So first I would like you just to say something about what is the situation there presently, because the media coverage here, of course, is very colored by the fact that many countries in Western Europe and the United States almost practically are in war, and therefore do not really cover what's going on the ground, but is more running an information war. So what can you say about the situation presently in Syria?
Yes, as I said before, that our information, or the more correctly information from Syria, we get this information from our families in Syria and our friends in Syria. And they are living from all the south to the north in Syria. We have a lot of members in our organization. They are calling their families and their friends in Syria almost every day. And the situation in Syria, of course, there is something happening there in Syria, but not everywhere. The most problems now in Syria is happening in Aleppo, in some places of Aleppo.
In terms of military fighting?
Yes, military fighting. Aleppo is, we have to know that Aleppo is a very big city. It's about 2 to 3 million inhabitants in Aleppo. And maybe the fighting is about 2-3 places in Aleppo. It's the center of Aleppo, a very small streets and much more inhabitant in the center of Aleppo. That's where the fighting is happening some places. And of course for the military it's a very big problem to get inside those places, because it will cause a lot of damage for the civilian people in Aleppo. And the army and the government, they are very aware that to not damage the civilian in Aleppo, because as we know, Aleppo it's a town who is supporting the president in Syria and the government in Syria. And that's why what we call them the rebels are using the civilian people as shelters in Aleppo. And we have, of course, some very little place in Latakia. It's close to the border in Turkey. It's happening sometimes, kind of fighting between the military and what you call it, the Free Syrian Army. A little of problems into the border with Iraq. It's happening there, something in Deir ez-Zor, what we call it Deir ez-Zor. But generally, the situation in Syria is much better than it was before.
Okay.
Even we don't heard this from the media, but the truth that the situation is much better than it was before.
So basically the military fighting is actually, it's not in generally all over Syria, it's very few places.
A few places, because
where then the rebels use, you could say, the civilian population as hostages.
Yes, because what you call it, the opposition, they are fighting as a guerrilla war. It's they are not everywhere, but you never know when they attack, when they shoot on, and they don't care. They shoot on people or in security forces, on military. They have only to shoot on someone to make troubles, to make damage to the civilian and to the government.
When we spoke earlier, you also said that right now it's actually not the military fighting that's the biggest problem for Syria, especially for the population, but that is the sanctions that has been imposed on Syria. Could you explain that, please?
Yes, when we talk to our families and our friends in Syria, the most or the biggest problem for them right now is everything. It become very, very expensive to buy. Something what you pay maybe 10 crown you have to pay 5 or 6 times more for the same things. They need medicine in the hospitals, they need food, fuels, and they are needing what ordinary people need every day. And even for us who live in Denmark or in Germany or in outside of Syria, they have a problem, for example, to send some money to their families there. If I want to send a little bit of money to my family to help them, then I can't. If I have to now to travel to Syria and to visit my family, I can't, because we can't fly from Denmark, from Copenhagen, we can't fly from England, from France, but there are many places you can travel to Syria right now. And of course those sanctions is not hurting the government, because I believe that the government was prepared for those sanctions and they have what they need. But the people, the poor fact is in Syria, the ordinary people in Syria, they pay for those sanctions. And I believe if the situation will stay as it is now, or maybe a half year, and we are really going to have a serious problems with this sanction in Syria, affecting on the ordinary people, not on the government, because we know from Iraq war that the sanctions in 12 years, they didn't affect Saddam Hussein or the government this time, but on the ordinary people, the Iraqis, who was paying a very high price for those sanctions.
So in the media or from the governments of the West, it has often been said that we will not go to war, at least right now, but instead of war, we choose something peaceful, sanctions, in order to have a change. So what you're saying is in reality that those peaceful means is actually a war, but a war directed against the population.
I believe if you ask the Syrian, they will prefer if the West was attacking Syria militarily, because maybe they will kill 20,000, 40,000, 100,000, but those sanctions is killing 24 millions. And I don't believe that the Western is punishing the government. I don't believe that. I believe that it's a punishment for the Syrian, because they was supporting their president. They want to make them suffer, to get hungry, and then they will agree that the West will maybe move Bashar al-Assad. But as long as they support Bashar al-Assad, I believe that the Western country will keep those sanctions in Syria.
To collectively punish the population for not making an uproar against the government.
Exactly.
It's something similar. It seems also to be the case with what has been the pattern of course, with all this fighting that has been moving around. There's a lot of refugees in Syria.
Yes.
Both Syrians, but also I know historically Syria has been one of the places where they have been receiving lots and lots of refugees from many other countries in the regions.
Yes.
So a lot of these people are now in trouble. Now, what is the situation with that? Because I know there's also been setting up. There's people internally in Syria that is running away from fighting, so to speak. But there's also been this build-up of refugee camps in Turkey.
Yes.
Could you say something about that?
Yes. I mean that the real refugees, they are inside Syria. We have, for example, in some cities, they get the refugees from another cities, the families, the friends, and they are here helping each other. And the refugees who take, for example, to Turkey or to Jordan or Lebanon, some of them was invited there to use this card of refugee against the President Bashar al-Assad. Turkey will show the world that we know we have problems with the refugees and we have to do something. What you call it, a fly zone area in Syria, a no-fly zone in Syria. They are using the refugee as a propaganda war against the government in Syria. And we saw the last times that the refugee inside Turkey, they fight to go back to Syria, and the Turkish say no. The Turkish say no. We cannot assure your safety in Syria. Then we don't allow. They are prisoners now in Syria.
They're not allowed to go back home.
They are not allowed to go back to Syria. Even the most of them will prefer to go back to Syria. And the government of Syria, they are willing, and they hope that the refugees will come inside Syria, because they know that all the Western country and all the world is watching those refugees in Turkey and in Jordan. Then I believe that the government in Syria will do everything to get those refugees go back to Syria.
But it's also because there's been stories that we know that there are these refugee camps in Turkey, but nobody really knows what is going on there, because they have been like cut off. That yes. Media, but also politicians, also Red Cross and other yes. organizations have not been allowed to come in and check what's going on.
Yes, we heard from Turkish newspaper. They was talking about almost 400 girls from Syria was raped in those camps. We saw in a newspaper from Saudi Arabia that some Saudi Arabians, they are buying small daughters from Turkey, from the camp in Turkey, and the price was between 500 to 800 of almost dollar or something like that. And we believe that the refugees the Syrian refugees in Turkey, they is treating very, very bad there, and they are keeping as a hostage as a prisoners in Turkey. And the same situation in Jordan. We see for 2 weeks ago there was a fight in the refugee camp in Jordan, and it was police and security forces from Jordan was fighting against the refugee in Jordan, because they was very badly treated in Jordan. And the most of them will prefer to go back to inside Syria again.
Because they have a lot of them has also been tricked. They have been
yes,
promised
yes,
that if they would leave,
yes,
they would get
yes.
maybe money, or they would be allowed to emigrate to a Western European country, the United States.
And some of them was forced just to refugee from Syria. Some of them was treated that if you don't leave the country, then we burn your houses and we kill family. And so there are a lot of things that make those people to refugee to inside Turkey or Jordan.
The Western media has taken organizations like the Syrian Human Rights Observatory in London at their word, and simply blamed all the massacres we've seen in Syria over the past 18 months on the government. What do you know of the actual reality of the ground? Because I know even there was a week ago there was a new massacre, right?
Yes, the most members of this organization, they are a Muslim Brotherhood, from the Muslim Brotherhood, and they are from the opposition. How can you get the real information and the truth from the opposition? We never heard about people who are maybe supporting the government, what their opinion about the situation in Syria. We get always the news and the information from the opposition, from the Syrian human rights, and the most member of them, they are from the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, who is fighting against the government in Syria.
With weapons.
Yes, with weapons. And that's what we don't believe in those human rights activities and everything from London.
But what can you say then about these massacres? Because there's been a pattern of these massacres, of a lot of people being killed at one place.
Yes, massacre has happened in Syria, but the most of them that what you call the Syrian Free Army who is doing those massacre, and they blamed the government and the army for doing that, because many of supporters for the president and from the government said, was dead in those massacres. How the military and the Syrian army, they will kill their own people and their own supporters.
So most of the massacres were actually massacres of people that were supporting the government.
Yes, yes, the most of them. Yes. The most of them. From all religions, it's no problem between Shia Muslim or Sunni Muslim. They are killing everyone who is not supporting the rebels.
There's also been a lot of talk in the media that now you see all of these defections, military leaders defecting, prime minister defected a month ago, diplomats defecting. So is this something that is a pattern that most people now are trying to flee and get away from Assad because they know he's going to be overthrown soon? Or is it actually the case that most of the government and the military is actually standing together to defend Syria, and these defections more are a product of bribes and blackmails and situations like that?
Yes, but basically all, even the American and the opposition from Syria, they was disappointed that only a few persons was leaving Syria after 1.5 years from this problem. The truth is that it's a very, very few persons who leave Syria, and we have to know that those people is leaving Syria for money. We know that Qatar is inviting, or the officers or people who is working in the government, the huge large sum of money they are invited to Qatar and to everything. Some people is trying to get money from this situation right now, or the people who is maybe was forced to leave Syria, because we know that the Syrian Free Army now is treating people. They come some information to some person and they said, if you don't leave Syria, we have to kill your family or to burn your house. And some people do it for money. Another maybe was forced to leave Syria. But the truth is that it is a very, very few persons who leave Syria after 1.5 years ago.
Prior to this eruption of foreign-funded and armed violence in Syria over the last 1.5 years, there was actually an opposition within Syria which were demanding reform from the Assad government with peaceful means. And they have also been participating in the recent elections, and they have been pressing for a dialogue. Now, with all the rebels and the military fighting going on, has that voice been totally stifled? Or is it still there?
Well, as you mentioned that some from opposition in Syria, we have to separate what we call opposition in Syria. We have the honest opposition in Syria who live in Syria right now, and they are demanding some reforms from the government and from the president. And the president and the government Syrian has agreed, and we get a new parliament election in Syria, and we have 2 ministers from the opposition right now in the government in Syria. And those kind of opposition in Syria, they don't recognize the opposition who is living in Istanbul, in Turkey, or they are disagree how they will treat the situation in Syria. Yes, it's still, until now, some people, they want a peaceful solution for the conflict in Syria. But we believe in Syria that it's not the opposition who is deciding if they want to go to discuss with the government or to keep fighting. We believe that Turkey and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and of course United States, they are refusing, or they are pushing those people to not agree to discuss or to have a kind of peaceful solution in Syria. Because I don't believe that even the rebels in Syria, they benefit something from this situation in Syria. There are days from both sides, they are destroying everything in Syria. They are destroying Syria, but I believe that they don't have their own decision if they want to discuss with the government, or they still fighting. I believe that it's come from the outside, from United States and especially Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They are keeping those people to fight in Syria because they don't want reforms in Syria. They don't want democracy in Syria. They want to destroy Syria.
So, with this situation, what is the best outcome you can foresee at this point? What would you like to happen right now to get out of this mess?
I hope that all the world, even USA and Russia and Russia and China, they will lay a pressure on both sides, the government and the opposition, to discuss, to have a dialogue, a peaceful solution. And we have a president election in 2014, and of course we have to get a free democratic selection in Syria, and the Syrian will vote. Maybe international observators has to assure that the election will be fair, and of course the Syrian people will have respect, or will respect the elected president in 2014.
So you're basically saying that if the Western world, instead of trying to make regime change and having this continuation of permanent war, would just sit down with Russia, in the United Nations Security Council, and actually follow what they agreed on through the United Nations of having peaceful negotiations, then there would actually be a way out of this.
If United States, of course, indirectly, through Turkey and Saudi Arabia, if they stop to send weapons to the Syrian Free Army, and if they stop to send money to keep those people in action, I believe that a peaceful solution will be a reality in Syria. Because I believe that the most of the people, maybe 90% of all the Syrians, they want a peaceful solution in Syria. But the problem is that with all those, with all the money and the weapons is getting inside Syria through Turkey and Jordan, it will make it impossible to have a peaceful solution in Syria.
Well, Mohammad Mahfoud, thank you for taking the time and enlightening us, and we hope that you will succeed in having that future for Syria.
Thank you very much.